Hello there. This is No Extra Words, One Person Search for Story, Season 3, Chris's audio book blog for Monday, the 29th of April, 2019. Saturday was Independent Bookstore Day. It was also my son's 5th birthday, so I didn't actually go to Independent Bookstore Day. I believe Independent Bookstore Day goes back to 2015 and my son goes back to 2014, and so I've never been. But I'm really hoping to make a thing of it next year. It's a big deal in Seattle. I think this year they had 21 bookstores in the Seattle area participate, and they are not all in Seattle proper. So it takes ferries and various things to hit them all. Most people that I saw on social media who were hitting them all, it was taking them somewhere in the vicinity of 10 hours, which honestly to me does not sound like enough to hit 21 bookstores. But we did make it out to one of them on Saturday after the birthday party. We took my kiddo to our local indie bookstore to spend some Easter money that he had. And he got to get a couple of books. So we got to get a little bit of a taste of it. And I was doing what I usually do in indie bookstores, which is taking pictures of book covers and feeling really guilty about doing that. So I thought I would come on and just talk a little bit about how I navigate indie bookstores. I ended up buying 5 books and taking 3 pictures, which is about a normal ratio for me. So a lot of people use indie bookstores to shop for books they get elsewhere. And in my case, I don't actually get them from online behemoths. I get them from the library, which may or may not be any better. But I am a big advocate of spending book money that you have at indie bookstores, because indie bookstores really keep literary activity alive in communities. They are the ones who sponsor author visits. They are the ones who sponsor writing contests. You know, if your local library is putting on a teen writing contest, odds are there's an indie bookstore somewhere that is acting as a sponsor. They also are really good at promoting and stocking the kinds of things no one else is going to. That was Max. Say hi, Max. If you want proof of that, just walk through the poetry aisle of your local indie bookstore and then walk through the poetry aisle of your neighborhood Barnes & Noble. The difference is going to shock you. So I'm a big believer that indie bookstores do way, way, way more than sell books. And honestly, in 2019, they wouldn't exist if all they were doing was selling books. I hear from people a lot that they're very concerned about Amazon being in the brick and mortar book business now, because they'll kill indie bookstores. And my answer to that comes in 2 parts. First of all, Amazon has been very successful at everything they've done, so I don't underestimate their ability to do anything. But secondly, I don't think Amazon knows as much about the book business as they think they do, because they're not really in the book business. Maybe they were 15 years ago, but they haven't been in a long time. And I think indie bookstores have had to, in order to exist, invent themselves in a way that I don't think Amazon understands. It has a lot more to do about literary culture and being a literary hub in a community living room than it does about actually selling books. So that is my opinion on that. I think I do my book browsing backwards, because I browse in bookstores and order in libraries. I think based on my experience as a librarian, a lot of people flip that. And probably if I did flip that, it would save me money. But this stays with me. Like, I want to say 15-ish years ago, I found a little used bookstore, and I was shopping with some friends at the time, and they were teacher friends who were very new in their teaching careers and were stocking classroom libraries. And so they, saw the deals on these used books and were just going crazy, filling boxes of books to stock classroom libraries. And I went through the place and I bought 3 books, 2 of them hardcover. One of them I know I still have. And I went to the counter to pay, and honestly, my total was pretty similar to my friend who bought like 24 books for my 3, because they were of a higher quality. And she looked at me and said, "You're not a teacher, are you?" I said, "Well, no, I'm a librarian." She said, "I thought so." She said, "You buy books like a book collector, like a librarian." And it's really hard for me to explain how I choose to buy the books I choose to buy. It has to do with I need to not just want to read them, but also want to live with them. If I just want to read them, I'll get them from the library. And I don't mind waiting in a library waiting list because I got stuff to read. So if I need to stick things in a waiting list and back burner them, even if it's a bestseller, that's fine. I'll wait. I'm not a super impatient person unless it's Harry Potter. I don't really have to have the bestseller the day it comes out. I'm happy to wait my turn. That's just me, but I do. If I just want to read it, I'll get it from the library. But so many books that I own that I have in my house are about the experience of having bought them. I remember where I got them. I remember the dinky little bookshop and what it smelled like and all of that when I picked this thing up. And that's what makes me want to have it and hang on to it and exist with it in my house is that feeling. This is where I'm supposed to get to my book recommendation you didn't ask for, which is tough because I realized I have a lot of books on books and I have a lot of books on selling books because I've always secretly wanted to run a bookstore. But the truth is I haven't read most of them, I think partly because I am afraid of myself really, really wanting to start a bookstore and bankrupting my world if I actually read them. So like I have the Rebel Bookseller sitting on my shelf right now. I have a book called Sixpence House, which is about Hay on Wye, the city of books in Wales that I know that I've talked about. So I have these books on books sitting around the house that I can't in good conscience recommend to you because I've never actually read them. So in trying to think about what book recommendation you didn't ask for do I want to give you for this particular episode, it had to come down to I had to recommend for you a book that I picked up in a local indie bookstore and why it is that I got it in a way that I wouldn't have picked it up in any kind of mainstream place. And the book that is Dear Genius, The Letters of Ursula Nordstrom, which I know I've talked about. But I picked that one up at Powell's. Now, if you've not been to Powell's and if you live anywhere near Portland, Oregon, you need to put Powell's on your list. Powell's is the granddaddy of independent bookstores. It is 6 stories and takes up an entire city block. It's new and used, all mixed together. It is an experience. Most book lovers could spend a day there all by itself. It's easy to get lost. They have maps. My last trip to Powell's was for National Novel Writing Month, November 2017. The Seattle NaNoWriMo folks took the train and had the great train ride in. And we got on the train in Seattle and we took it down to Portland and we were in Portland, I think, for 4 hours and then we took the train home. So the idea was you were riding on the train and then you had time to hang out in Portland for a few hours before you got back on the train to write all the way home. And of course we went to Pell's because what else do you do? And it was a tricky one because I had to get books I wasn't going to have to read right away because I was in the middle of NaNoWriMo. And I had to get books that were easy to carry because I was going to get on the train. And I picked up Dear Genius and I took a look at it. And I'm like, I need to own this book. I'd never heard of it at that point. Ursula Nordstrom was editor-in-chief at what was then called the Books for Boys and Girls division at Harper & Row. She started at Harper & Row, I want to say right around 1940. And was there for 40 years. And this book is her collected correspondence with everyone. And there's almost no book that you can think of that was published in the middle part of the 20th century that doesn't have Ursula Nordstrom's fingerprints on it somewhere. And that goes for everything from Little House on the Prairie, Where the Wild Things Are, Harriet the Spy, you name it, she had her fingers on it. And this is her collected letters and it's riveting. I read it last summer as part of a summer read, but I picked this book up used at Powell's. It was out of print at the time. It was shelved in with the new stuff. This is the kind of book that you only find when you're thumbing through an indie bookstore. And these are the kinds of experiences that I have, and how books like that come to me is through digging in the murky basements of indie bookstores. So it's a slog to read that book. I'm not going to lie. It's long, but it's fascinating. She's got a great, wonderful voice of her own. Plus, she's corresponding with all these great writers. If you are a lover of children's books, you need to get your hands on Dear Genius. So that's your book recommendation you didn't ask for. How did I decide which 5 books I took home? I'm walking around taking pictures and all that. And how do I decide what to buy? Because obviously I want to buy the whole store whenever I'm at an indie bookstore, but I have limited funds and limited shelf space. One of the things that I've started doing in recent years is I try to buy something that's new in hardcover in every indie bookstore that I'm in, at least one thing, because I want to support the store and I also want to support the authors. And I know that the only way to do that is to buy new hardcover or trade paperback, because that's the only way that everybody really makes their money. They're not making money in mass market. I love used books. I'm a big defender of used bookstores. I think they're golden in terms of both keeping literature alive, keeping it out of the landfill. They're green. I would never slam used bookstores. But if you want authors to get paid, you got to buy something new once in a while. So I try to do that. And I try to spend my new hardcover money on stuff that isn't as well known, as I feel like the New York Times bestsellers are doing just fine without me. They may not need the royalty payment they're going to get from me, but some solidly mid-list author does. The one I picked up yesterday is a book of haiku for kids, and it was on sale because it's Poetry Month, and so they had a deal on poetry. So I broke my own rule. I didn't get anything that was totally full price. And I feel like I should run the math for you real quick. So if this is going to be dry to you, feel free to skip the next couple minutes. But to really understand the margins at which these booksellers operate, I think you got to understand the math of how the money works. So let's say mid-list author by the name of Smith publishes a new novel that's going to have a cover price of, let's make the math easy, $25 is the cover price of this book. They are book distributors, so big warehouses that sell to booksellers and libraries, and that's where the bookseller is going to get their books from. That warehouse is going to sell the bookseller that book for probably a 40% discount. If they're a good, solid, good-sized indie bookstore, they're going to get a 40% off the cover price, with the option most of the time to return it if it doesn't sell. So they're going to pay $15 for this hardcover. Put it in their store and sell it for $25. So that profit margin of that $10 goes to the bookstore, who of course has to pay for a lot of things, employees and rent and electricity, and also the author visit they have next week. And, it's not a huge profit margin. And also those hardcover books are their bread and butter, because they're not making a ton of money off, paperbacks and other things that they sell. So there's that. And then of course, that's the way it used to work, is that they'd sell those things full price. But now they're competing with the online retailers who will sell those new hardcovers for $16. Excuse me. There was a tweet by a bookstore that went viral a couple weeks ago that was all about this. That was, sort of like, your indie book retailer can sell books at a loss. They're fine doing that. They don't need to make a profit off books. That's not their bottom line. Which is why they can sell you that new hardcover for $16 and we can't. So that's how things work on the publisher end of it. And I'm talking about traditional publisher things here. I'll talk indies in just a sec, but that's how things work on the bookseller end of it. On the publishing end of it, so there's that $15 that's been paid to the book distributor. And of that, 10% is a pretty normal amount of royalty for an author to get. Some get a little more depending on their contract. But so $250 goes to the author. And then the rest of that gets divvied up. Some of it, of course, is going to the printer and is just purely the cost of making the thing. And then some of it goes to that book distributor. The bulk of it goes back to the publisher, who pays their people and does what they do, and then also raises their bottom line. Because, of course, that's really who's in the book selling business at the end of the day, is that publisher. So the economics of it, that's how it works. So how do books go on sale? Because I like a good sale. So how do books go on sale? Well, there's two ways. The first is the bookstore might put it on sale, which is what happened with my poetry book, in which case what the publisher and the author are making stays the same. And then what the bookstore is making has gone down a little bit. And then the other way is books get remaindered. So a remaindered book is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, which is leftover. When a book is going out of print, when it stops selling, and books go out of print really fast nowadays, the warehouse has to get rid of what they have left because the publishers ordered a certain number of print run. It's cheaper for them to do that than it is for them to print on demand. It's cheaper for them to say they want this many thousand books printed. So they're going to have leftovers, and those are sitting around the warehouse collecting dust. And so they sell them to the booksellers for what they can get. Sometimes it's $2 a book or whatever. And then the bookseller can sell them for whatever they can get. The caveat being that they can't send them back. So once you buy remaindered books as a bookseller, you have them and you have to deal with them. You as a consumer will know that you have one of these because they are usually marked. If you've ever looked at the bottom of a book, if it's closed and you look at the bottom where the pages are and you see a black dot or a black slash, that's been remainder. That's the mark they get on them so the booksellers know they can't send them back. And those are the books you'll see at your bookseller for, new hardcovers for $5 or whatever. Those are usually remainders. My understanding is authors they get first priority to buy their own remainders if they want them, but they generally do not get royalties on them unless for some reason the warehouse manages to sell them for more than it costs to print them. So, let's say it costs $3 to print a book and they manage to sell it to a bookseller for $3.50. The author might get 10% of that 50 cents. But they're usually not going to sell for more than what it costs to make them. So usually neither author nor publisher gets anything for those. Bookseller gets whatever they can get on a markup for those. And I buy them, and I think they're a great deal. I certainly would rather have them be in my house than in a landfill. But this is why I like to make sure that I've bought at least one thing that's new in hardcover, because I want to make sure that at least some of my book buying money has gone into a world where everybody gets paid. Like I say, I get a lot of books that I don't want to live with, that I just want to read from the library. And in terms of the library and authors getting paid, that is endlessly controversial. Most writers, I think, love libraries and love the role they play in literacy and society, and, whatever ding they might have on their royalties because of that is sort of the cost of doing business. In many other countries, there's actually a government subsidy that you get for having your book in libraries. It's supposed to kind of make up for your lost royalties. It's not much, but they get it, which is nice. In the U.S., though, we have something called the right of first purchase, which means the first person to purchase the copy of a copyrighted work gets to do with that copy whatever they want. So if I buy a copy of your book, I can destroy it and make art out of it. I can read it and throw it away. I can sell it. I can lend it to someone. I can do whatever I want with that copy. The caveat, of course, is I can't be a distributor of it. That's a violation of your copyright. So I can't turn it into an audiobook. I can't make copies of it and sell them. I can't, that kind of thing. But I can take my copy and do whatever I want with it, which gives libraries the ability to lend it without paying for that privilege. The ding that authors get on royalties because of libraries, I think, is often overstated. Most library books circulate an average of about 10 times before they disappear. So if you assume that maybe a tenth of those readers would have bought the thing if they hadn't gotten it from the library, or maybe even a fifth of them, then yeah, you've taken a small ding to your royalties, but you're not talking about a considerable amount. The library buys the copy, so they buy that book, usually at that same 40% discount from the book distributor, and that same $2.50 goes into the author's pocket for that privilege. So, anytime you save money on books, you're taking a hit out of an author's pocket. That's part of the way things go. I think supporting indie bookstores helps offset that a little bit because of all that they do in terms of creating value in the literary community. A note on independently published books. I don't read a lot of independently published books. I'm certainly not an expert on them, but here's the thing I will tell you. Almost to a fault, the independently published books I do buy and read are ones I get from my local indie bookseller. I think a lot of indie writers are taught to market direct to consumer and to, mobilize their existing networks, and all that's well and good, but you have to remember to be where book people are too. And book people are in indie bookstores and libraries. So it behooves you to make friends with those people and to get your book in those places. And it's been my experience, indie bookstores love to work with local authors, including indie authors, as long as you're willing to work with them. I mean, I think one pet peeve I hear, and as a librarian I've experienced this too, is sometimes indie authors, especially new ones, overestimate what the demand is going to be for their books. And so try to unload more copies than your local indie bookseller may actually want. So please work with them, be ready to do author visits, all that kind of stuff, but trust their expertise. And all the stuff I've talked about in terms of the way authors get paid and books get distributed. If you're an indie author, you know you're making a lot more than $2.50 per book on your sales. But the flip side of that is you don't have all that apparatus set up to distribute your book to bookstores. You have to do your own hustling and, basically earn your money. So that is my life in indie bookstores. And now I have a bunch of new books to take on, which is having me reevaluate the whole way I set reading goals, which has been my big thing this week. So stay tuned for more on that. I'll probably have some Instagram stories up on what's going on in that part of my world. And we'll talk soon about all things books and stories. In the meantime, I hope you're having a wonderful time and finding lots of good things to read. I will talk to you very soon.